So, good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you joining us today. I'm Gopika Raji, and I'm really happy to hosting today's session of Tech Talkies webinar series by .com Infoway, episode 3. First of all, thank you very much for taking the time to join us this evening, whether you're joining from your office, from home, or maybe taking a short break in between your busy schedule. We truly appreciate you being here with us today. At .com Infoway, we strongly believe that knowledge becomes more valuable when it's shared. And that's exactly the idea behind the Tech Talk series. Through this platform, our goal is to bring together industry professionals, marketers, developers, and digital enthusiasts to explore new ideas, discuss emerging trends, and learn directly from experts who are actively shaping the digital space. And here's something exciting I would like to share with all of you. This is our third episode of Tech Talks. The response to the previous sessions has been absolutely wonderful, and we're really excited to continue this journey with all of you. Our goal with Tech Talkers is simple: to bring practical insight, real world expertise, and meaningful conversations directly to professionals like you. And today's session is going to be particularly interesting because we are driving into a topic that plays a huge role in digital visibility and online success. That is nothing but the technical SEO. But before we get started, just a quick note for everyone joining us today. If you have any questions during the sessions, please feel free to drop them in a QA box. We'll collect them and address them towards the end of the session. So don't hesitate to participate. Stay curious, stay engaged, and make the most session full. All right, then, let's get started. Welcome to today's session, Technical SEO Masterclass, What Really Drives Rankings. When people think of SEO, they often think of keywords, backlinks, and content. But behind every high performance website is a strong technical foundation. Technical SEO helps search engines crawl, understand, and index your website effectively. So it almost improves site performance, structure, and user experience across devices. In today's search landscape, factors like site architecture, page speed, crawlability, indexing, structured data, and core web vitals all play a major role in rankings. So in this session, we will look at what really drives ranking today with technical SEO factors matter most and how business can build a stronger foundation for search success. And now let's welcome our guest speaker for today. I'm truly happy to introduce Mercy Janaki, who will be sharing her insight with us today. A hearty welcome to you, ma'am. I would like to tell you a few lines about you. Moving forward, with your permission, Mercy is a highly experienced SEO professional with more than 50 years of experience in building powerful search strategies and driving digital growth across multiple industries. She is currently part of SEO and growth team at Epicor, where she works on improving search visibility and helping business grow through effective search strategies. Over the years, Mercy has worked across industries like e-commerce, enterprise technologies, financial services, B2B SaaS, real estate, edtech, and healthcare. Through this journey, she has developed deep expertise in technical SEO, content strategy, brand marketing, and scaling SEO across large organizations. What makes her work truly special is her ability to connect SEO with real business impact and collaborate with different teams to deliver measurable results. So today, we're really excited to hear from her perspective on our topic and learn from her rich experience in the SEO space. I'm sure this session is going to be insightful, practical, and full of valuable takeaways for us. So, everyone, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Mercy Janaki. Mercy, a warm welcome to you, and it's over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gopika. And it's wonderful being here, and thanks for having me. And when you guys reached out to me, as I have mentioned, it's truly really special for me to be here because a lot of my learnings actually happened in .com Infoway. So it's really a very special feeling to come back and share what I have learned, over a period of time. So thanks for having me. Yeah. And yeah, let's get into this, and feel free to, attendees, if you have any questions, we don't necessarily have to wait till the end. In case you have any questions, please, put it on the chat, and, probably Gopika can pick it up and we can have it in between as well. So technical SEO is always close to my heart. from the beginning, I'm not a very technical person. I haven't learned coding myself earlier. Probably I have a very basic knowledge in, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS and stuff like that. But with that, what I have learned is you don't necessarily have to be a, very strong coder or a developer, or you need to have the developer mindset in you to, do the technical SEO. That is the greatest learning that I have got over a period of time with whatever, with little technical knowledge that I have had in my, understanding, and what I was able to, solve for the brands that I had worked with. Right. So if you see, for an example, technical SEO, most of us will think that, it's all about some spreadsheets with, too much of data, and, you have a lot of checklists to follow, and, a lot of technical elements that people might not be aware what it is actually, and how it is going to give a measurable impact for the brands that you work with. But, from my perspective, I always have things in my mind. Say, for an example, I run a crawl on a particular website through, so many tools across in the market. A Screaming Frog is one of the favorite of mine, actually. So say, for an example, it throws you, hundreds of issues, in front of you. In case you are working on a large scale website or an e-commerce website, the volume of issue or the pages that are affected is going to be huge. So always, it is perfectly okay for anybody to feel overwhelmed with, what is in front of you, but you have to prioritize among what you see, because not every issue is not worth investing your time, first of all. And tools are tools, right? Like, it works based on certain predefined, rules and, some prompts. Say, for an example, all the tools in the market will tell you your HTML to, code ratio is very bad. I wouldn't even go and pick that. Even if there are 10,000 pages affected by that particular issue, I wouldn't put any, my mind and soul to go and fix those issues, because it's not going to make any positive impact for the, brand that you work with. Rather, you have a lot of other things that you can work from a technical perspective. So rather than seeing this from a spreadsheet point of view, or a, list of issues point of view, probably what I would recommend is, have three things in your mind when you start with technical SEO. Is my content crawlable, right? Like, because currently, most of you would be coming from an agency, I believe. So a lot of your clients would be actively and equally be investing time and money in creating content as well, right? So the end of the day, the content that they publish in their website has to be crawled, read and understood by the bots, and then be ranked in Google or LLMs or, AI platforms or whatever it is, right? So that is the end objective. So you always see with the mindset, when you see a data from a technical audit or a technical crawl, is this particular problem is going to solve, or it is going to aid the search engine bots to understand my content better, right? Am I providing the navigation easy and, solvable for the search engine bots, so that even if I publish the content in the blog might be the, least preferred navigation path in the website. Consider you have a e-commerce website, your category, subcategories, and the product pages, that is going to take a lot of your, priority, right? Your blog and the informational content is always going to be buried somewhere at the bottom. So with the mind, think that, am I, publishing the content in the right place, or am I providing the search engine bots the right navigation path so that it can crawl the content? And okay, then the crawling path is fixed and I have provided the right navigational path for the bots. Then is the bots are, good enough or easy enough to understand my content, right? The bots are not seeing what I and you are seeing it in the website. You and I see the very visual part of the website, fully front-end coded with a lot of interactive features, and, the colors and forms and videos and images. That is what you and I see it on the website. But the bots doesn't see that. They see the, complete messy, code. That is what the crawlers are seeing it. With that in mind, am I providing the easy way for bots to understand my content? It can be the hierarchy, right? Like hierarchy. That is why SEOs are always obsessed with heading tags. If you go to your developers, probably they will have, okay, the H1 is not in the H1 format, but it is big enough so that people understand that it is the title of the page. But SEOs are so obsessed because without having the H1 tag, added to that particular element, your bots are not going to know that this is the title of the page, right? So the hierarchy, the order of the page is going to be very, very important. If it is a blog post, then probably your H2s and your bulletin points, and if you are comparing something, then the table format. So these are all going to be equally important for Google's to understand what type of content that you are, putting across, right? And the third important point to have in mind is, am I, giving more importance for both SEO as well as AI? Because you cannot live without AI going forward, right? Like it's become inevitable in your life, inevitable in your professional going forward. But it's not a rocket science. It's not something new. The technical SEO base is very similar for both SEO as well as the AI, right? And I don't know whether to call it as AEO or GEO, because the industry is still debating on that. Everybody has their own terms to call that out. But whatever that you call it, it's up to you. But the base is the same, right? The only difference that I see is probably the search engines nowadays. At least Google is sophisticated enough to crawl the content that is coming through JavaScript. But the AI, language model, the large language models and the bots that they use, they are not currently sophisticated enough to crawl the content that is coming through JavaScript, right? So you have to make sure that, don't just optimize the page for Google, but also optimize for the so-called AI bots that are not good enough for the, JavaScript. So, this is the only, technical related differences that I see between the traditional search engine bots versus the AI bots. Right. So now, that is why I keep saying, to my team also, don't, differentiate between technical SEO versus SEO. Technical SEO is pretty much part of your SEO, and that is the base, right? Say for an example, we took an example of content, how it cannot be crawled and all of that. So if your technical SEO is so weak and you are publishing like super good, humanly, editorial level of content in your website, without proper technical SEO, then probably the content is not going to, surface anywhere in Google. At the same time, check the reverse criteria as well. Your technical SEO is strong, but your content is like, messy, or, it's not providing any value. Probably you're just running it through the, AI, content generators and publishing it, not adding any value to the users. Then there is no content for Google to pick and, serve, right? So your technical SEO and the other content related activities should complement each other, so that it can very well support one another and start bringing you results. So that is the one thing that I always tell. And now probably getting into the specifics of technical SEO, crawling is very, very important, right? Like there are hundreds of tools available, but it is better to take Google Search Console as a primary source of truth for you to see how Google is seeing your website. There are sections in Google Search Console where you can see how your pages are getting indexed, right? Lot of people don't really have time to get into the settings. Under the settings tab, you have the crawl analytics area. where Google will tell you how much of your crawl budget is being spent on HTML pages versus JavaScript versus 200 OK, which means, the real pages that you want the people to come and, read about it, versus the 404 pages, or, the server related 5 errors and all of those things, right? So that can be your starting point, and you can understand if 90% of your crawl budget is being used for your HTML versus JavaScript versus 200 OK, then it is well and good. If 60% of your crawl is going for these and 40% is going for your redirected pages or broken pages like 404, 410, then it is a problem area, right? Then you will understand, okay, something is terribly wrong, so I have to go fix it. And it is, if you guys are using any tools, then it is always better to enable the JavaScript rendering as well, because and again, it is better to sit with your developer, be it your internal team or your client team, to understand what is the kind of a tech stack is being used in the website, right? Now people wanted to have a very sleek and interactive website, and if you wanted to build a website in that area, obviously JavaScript will be part of that execution model, right? So your framework could be Next.js or AngularJS. So there is a way team can do this JavaScript integration. There can be server-side integration, there can be client-side integration, or there can be a dynamic side integration. I mean, it's a combination of both, right? So if you don't know these basics, then it will be very difficult for you to crack what is actually creating the problem. If there is no problem, all the pages are being crawled, well and good, no problem, you can just go ahead and start with your typical keyword research and all of that. But in case there is a lot of JavaScript related issues, then it is very difficult. Then you need to have an understanding what is the framework is being used in the website. Then if it is a JavaScript is being used, then probably enable the JavaScript rendering while doing the technical audit, so that the audit will be more useful, because eliminating JavaScript and only running the HTML side of the audit is not going to be so fruitful, right? And you don't have to worry. Sometimes you don't have a developer beside you for whatever reason, or some quick audit that you have to do. There are online tools like BuiltWith. You can just input the URL of the website, the domain of the website, and it will clearly tells you what are all the technologies or what are all the frameworks that is being used. So with that input, you can do this audit much in a reliable and more useful way. And now a lot of people also talk about the core web vital and all of that, right? So I don't really see web core vital has a ranking influential as the other factors has it, like the content, like the internal linking and stuff like that. But Google do say that it is a part of their ranking algorithm. But in my experience, what I have seen is probably it can be a supportive element, right? Say for an example, there are two similar brands that are competing for the top one result in Google, and top one is also just a temporary real estate, right? You can't own that space all the time. So I mean, it's a technical SEO task, but I just wanted to emphasize all of you, don't worry about being on the top, because some surveys even tells people ranking in the second and third position has a higher CTR than the people who rank in one. So I'm not saying that you don't have to aim. Please aim for better positions, but you don't have to worry about it in case you are not there, right? And sorry, I think we have just deviated from the topic. So the core web vitals, we don't have to be so obsessed with, like, don't aim for always perfection. Don't aim that you should be having 90% in desktop or 80% in mobile or 100% in desktop. You don't have to, please. I have always seen a lot of back and forth between the developers and the SEO team. sometime, kind of argument and all of that, because developers works with a lot of gray areas in the web core vital side of things, because there will be a lot of scripts which you will not be able to remove it. Only if you remove it, you will be able to bring it to the better number, better percentage. But it is not ideally possible, because those scripts could have been linked for certain tracking purposes and all of that. Especially if you work for a B2B enterprise companies, they do multiple tracking codes. It's not just the Google Analytics, right? They will have Salesforce for CRM. They will have certain JavaScript codes for some chatbot generation, and some for heat map analysis. So there could be a lot of JavaScript codes could have been added there. So you cannot pull everything outside and put it in a external file also, because it won't help them to tackle the numbers, I mean the data very precisely within their CRM system that they are using. So as an SEO, while you are working for technical SEO, you also need to have a collaborative mindset, right? Like from an SEO point of view, you wanted to bring your website score better, no doubt about it. I also wanted to do that for my clients or for my company. But at the same time, you need to also have an understanding whether my developer will be able to do that, right? Whether my designer will be able to do that. Is because end of the day, it is going to be for a single business. If the business owner wanted to have an interactive feature or a very heavy high resolution video or an image for certain business purposes, you need to find a workaround to work around that. You cannot go and ask your clients or a developer to remove it because it is affecting SEO, right? But you educate the client. Education is also very, very important. Educating the developers, educating the client is also very important. Telling them why probably we are going to do that. So I think of this also when I talk about the client. Don't always use the SEO jargons. The client won't really worry about that. If you say my crawling is affected or my crawl budget is getting wasted, they give a damn about it, right? They don't understand it. Because the business owners doesn't necessarily have to be a technically savvy people. Most of the business owners are technically challenged. So if you are able to tie that back to the business profit that it can provide, then it can become an interesting conversation with the client. So even if you wanted to probably a JavaScript framework heavy website, it's heavily relied on JavaScript. Even your content is being injected through JavaScript. So the bots has to pass the JavaScript codes, render the JavaScript codes to understand even one little word that you have written about it, about your product or about your service. But it is very difficult because you have not done it in a very search engine friendly way. So you go and tell the client that it is affecting my crawling and rendering. It's not work. The client might come and say, okay, whatever, you are the expert, do with whatever that you have. But instead you go and tell them, like show the competitor, maybe they haven't used JavaScript as much as your client has used it, and show the differences, how the rendered version looks like and how Google is able to see that. And because of that, how the traffic has been improving for them consistently, and what is the kind of visibility they have in the particular niche or in the market or in the geography, right? That kind of comparison going with the data to the client probably would be a better approach, so that the client understand what they are missing, right? Rather than we just saying that you don't have it, but always go with the data. Something else, somebody has done it and this is working out well for them, and why don't we do this for us, right? It is going to be a long run for them. And also provide a kind of a projection for them. Okay, we are going to spend 3 months fixing this issue from a developer point of view. and the development is going to take this much of hours or business days. And from when I can start seeing improvement in Google, right? Probably 3 months down the line or 5 months down the line. I know we will not be able to predict it very clearly, very precisely, but it is okay to tell them tentatively, approximately, when you can start seeing some improvement in terms of the indexed pages. Maybe go with the most, don't talk about the ROI because it's a very huge thing. You and I don't have the base data to even benchmark against that. But you tell them currently only 2 pages are indexed. Maybe after the implementation done, you can have 10 pages in Google, right? And the ranking probably would be at the lower place. And we will take another 2 months to start showing those improvements. So this is how probably I suggest we have the conversation with the stakeholders, so that we can get a buyout. Because in mostly large organizations, these technical SEO tickets always reside as a Jira ticket. They won't go beyond that, right? Because the product team will have their own priorities. The development team have their own priorities. They will have some migrations and a lot of other things to take care. So the SEO team always gets the least priority. So that is why I have tried, and this actually worked for me as well. Go with the data, do comparisons, tell them what they can expect out of the suggestions that you are providing. Then probably it is going to be a better conversation with the client. So this is also something we can definitely think of. So having a better mindset, having a collaborative mindset, to whom I'm going to talk about it, right? Is this conversation going to be with the development team? Then probably you can have a technical conversation. But am I going to talk to my client? Am I going to talk to my CEO? Then probably it is going to be a totally different conversation, because those SEO technicality of discussion is not going to sit well with those stakeholders. So that's what I think. Do we have time to address a couple of other points?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay, cool. So, and not every technical issue is a great or an immediate priority for every single business. Say, for an example, you have an e-commerce website, then you have a different set of priorities. You have an international website, you have a different set of priorities. If it is an e-commerce website, probably I would be thinking about fixing the pagination, because that is where I can lose out a lot of crawling budget if it is not optimized probably. And the most common issue that I have seen in e-commerce website, especially with the pagination, is all the paginated pages will be canonicalized to the main version, but it should be canonicalized to the self version. The page should be canonicalized to that version. So e-commerce website is very critical to let the crawler crawl all parts of the website, right? Because say, for an example, Amazon, for an example, millions of pages they have. If most of the time Google bot might land on the home page, you cannot have every single page linked from the home page, right? So that is why you have the pagination for the category pages, subcategory pages. So once the crawler reaches the category pages, the pagination, branches out a different new opportunity for the bots to, crawl the rest of the particular section at least. But if you canonicalize to the home page, then Google will not even attempt to, get into the second, third, and so on and so forth, right? So that is the most important common issue that I have seen it in e-commerce websites. And you say, for an example, you have an international SEO website. So you have multiple geographies targeted. So you have a separate subfolder or a subdomain for US and UK, and one for Vietnam, or one for Australia, and so many other. And hreflang attribute is going to be one of the key that you have to audit and understand. I will not be worried about the pagination for international SEO, because my objective for international SEO is, maybe I have the similar content for US and UK, but I want my UK page to rank in UK and US page to US, right? That's the prime objective. I can worry about everything else at a later point in time. I have to fix this first because that's the most important priority. So, that is why it is also important for us to understand the objective of the business, what the client expects out of this business, and what SEO team is going to have as a supportive, collaborative partner to provide that output. So that mindset is also very important. So understand, don't think always technical SEO as a spreadsheet exercise. It's not that. Make sure you have the right language for right people, so that you can get a buy-in from them in case you wanted to implement anything. And prioritize things. Depends on the website, depends on the business model. Prioritize the technical SEO, so that you can start showing the immediate results. Because we always say in SEO, it depends, right? When the ranking will come, it depends. When the improvement will come, it depends. So rather than giving that very old school answer, it is better to prioritize, know what is going to make a better impact, and work on that. Probably these are the few things that I had in mind.
Thank you so much, Mercy. That was truly an insightful session. I'm sure everyone has gained us some valuable perspectives on how technical SEO plays a crucial role in improving search visibility and also rankings. So we have shared several practical insights today, and I believe many of our participants now have much clearer understanding of what really drives search performance in today's digital landscape. So once again, thank you for sharing your experience and expertise with us. Now let's move on to the next segment of our session. So we'll now move into our expert QA segment. So in this part of the session, I'll be asking a few important questions related to the technical SEO, so that we can explore the topic a little deeper and gain more insights from her experience. So let's get started with our first question. Shall I, ma'am?
Yeah, please go.
Yeah. In 2026, what are the most important technical SEO factors influencing Google rankings?
There are no specific set of things that I can say, because every day things changes, and every day new technology comes in, and you have to work around with that, right? Probably 10-15 years back, most of the websites are built in only HTML. Now a lot of websites are built only on JS, right? So it's a very tough question to do, but as per the current present day scenario, probably I would say crawlability of a website, that is going to be your biggest impact creator, and the interlinking, because a lot of other factors have external dependencies, wherein your internal linking exercise can be a very easy cakewalk for the SEOs out there, because the content is there already. You have to just identify the pattern to group them thematically, to make sure Google understands the content theme that you are trying to create, so that it can start ranking. So the interlinking and crawlability and structured data, right? Like the structured data probably is not a ranking signal. In my everybody knows that it's not a ranking signal, but I would still prefer to keep it in the top 3, because it gives a very strong understanding for bots to know what type of content it is, right? So with a very smaller blog posting, then Google has a pretty clear understanding that this is a top of the funnel content. It's an informational intent content. You have a FAQ section within the same content. So you have an FAQ schema. People were spamming with an FAQ schema earlier, so Google has removed it from the rich snippet now. But still, it still holds the value to Google to understand these are question and answer types of content, right? You have a video, so you can add a video markup schema. Even in the AI overviews in Google, there are videos surfacing a lot for a lot of informational intent content, right? So it is very important for us to capture that real estate in Google search result pages as early as possible, before the competitors come and take their place. So the schema markups are very very least used, is what I say, because people will use schema markup, but it will be very common, like the blog posting schema or an organization schema, or probably the if it is an e-commerce website, probably they will have a product schema. But there are a lot of other schemas that you can try it out. You and if you don't have I mean, not everybody have to know everything, right? Even if I get a new section is into the website, say for an example case study, say for an example success stories, or some webinars, or some podcast episodes. So these are all have some specific schemas that you can apply. Podcast have podcast episode schema, so it gives you a rich snippet. But if you are on a B2B segment, these mid and the bottom funnel content, like the case studies and success stories, are going to be very key, because that is where your potential customers will make a decision to either buy your product or get your service, right? So that is very important to treat those pages also as equally as your product page. I always see a tendency that I have optimized my product page, but your case study and success stories pages will not be optimized. But don't do that. See how what are the kind of schemas that you can use it. You have ChatGPT, you have Google Gemini, have a conversation with that. It can clearly tells you what kind of if it is a downloadable asset, then you can even have a download action. So Google understands that there is a download action has to happen. Even if it is a gated asset, you have a certain snippet already added in the content. So with that, Google can understand, right? Like what is the information that the asset might have. So as much as a schema markups, if you can use it, it is going to be helpful. Even the AI bots are also heavily relied on this information. So it is better. And make sure whatever that you added in the schema markups is also renderable, because AI bots only render the HTML versions, not the JavaScript. The schema comes with the JSON markup. So that is one of the important point that you can keep it in mind. Yeah, these are the three things I would suggest.
That's a great overview of how technical SEO continues to evolve with search engines. So I'm moving to the next question. Do core web vitals still directly affect rankings or mainly user experience?
Yeah, I think we slightly touched during our overview section as well. It might be a ranking factor, but not as influential as the other ones that we think of. It will definitely complement the good content or the good optimization that you have. Say for an example, you have a good website page, you have a good content, you have optimized it, you have a better schema marked for each of the types of content that you have within the page, then probably the web core vital come into place, right? Similar competitor also have something similar, and you have a faster website and your competitor has a very slow loading website, probably you get a better place. So that is how it works. So that is why I also said, with web core vital, don't always too complicate things. It is good to have, like, always aim for better speed, because as you said, as your question said, it affects the user experience, right? As a end user, if I wanted to do some shopping, for whatever occasion, if the page is not loading quickly, or if I'm not, getting what I'm looking for, I won't have the patience to wait. I'll just quit the page and I look for something else, right? Similarly, your potential audience as well. Think of a scenario where the enterprises businesses have millions of dollars of revenue pipeline that you are losing it out, right? It's not just about the numbers. It's not just about what's the mobile speed. It is the missed opportunity to have the revenue pipeline not filled with the right audience, right? And say for an example, the web core vital, it's not again related to the pages that you wanted to rank. Even if maybe your page is already ranking well in Google, user is trying to load and it is taking hell lot of time, and the people will leave it, right? You are losing the customer there. So it is definitely a huge impact on the user experience, but it can also complement the SEO ranking. Yeah.
Interesting point on how core web vitals now balance ranking signals with user experience. Thank you. The next one is, what are the most common technical SEO mistakes websites make?
See, it depends on lot of areas where people don't even think, how my pages are being crawled and rendered, right? I think now people have a lot of, understanding and visibility on differences between crawling and rendering. But earlier, maybe 5 years back, people just think about the crawling. They don't even, thought about what is rendering. Should I even go beyond that? So what I'm saying is, sometimes your page get 100% crawled and 0% rendered, right? That, which means that Google has seen that there is a page exists in domain xyz.com, but they don't even understand what is written there, right? Because they haven't rendered the information from there. Sometimes Google will crawl the page and render half of the page. Here is where probably the web core vital come into picture, because if it is a very slow loading page, or you have a lot of unwanted scripts or broken scripts in the page, because your bots is going to only look into the script of the page, I mean the back end code of the website, right? It's not seeing the front side as you and me sees it. So from there, if it is broken, then it exits the page. It doesn't crawl the rest of the page. So partially rendered page. And so these are all the very, very common mistakes that people don't give attention to. Some people don't even know that we have to check the rendering part. So Google has, in Google Search Console, you can use the URL inspection tool to see how the rendered HTML version looks like. But there are couple of Chrome extensions available. If you can Google it for SEO rendered Chrome extension, you can find. So those are very handy. You can just click that Chrome extension on your browser bar, and it will show the difference between what you currently have it in the HTML version and what is the rendered version, right? So it is very difficult to write proper content. It is very difficult to publish it the way SEO people wanted to have it on the page. And if it is not rendered, then it is we will be at the loss. So this is the most common mistake I see: partially rendered pages. And as I also mentioned, hreflang attributes in international websites are the most common issues that I have seen. Either it is not implemented at all, or it is not completely messed up. They will not be having its default, or they will not having the callback for each of the regions that they have. So that is a messy area that I have seen in my experience. And the other one is probably the misuse of schema, right? Because people keep saying, even I have told many times today, how important the schema is. People try to go overboard. It's okay to go overboard, but if it is irrelevant, or if you are against the Google guidelines that is being set up, then you are at risk. Google can manually penalize you as well. The very common thing I have seen is the product schema implementation. If it is a Flipkart type of e-commerce website, please go ahead and implement it. You have a lot of options within the product schema to have whether it is in stock or not. What is the discount that you have? Do you have a coupon code for that? Lot of internal nested elements that you can have in the product schema. But some service oriented pages also uses the product schema, because product schema gives the rich snippet in the search engine result page. They wanted to leverage that. And equally the local business schema as well, with review and ratings and all, they give it in a very manipulative way. As per Google guidelines, if you are using your local business schema with a review rating or a product schema with a review rating, you need to have the exact review, the numbers in your website. The review should be part of your product pages. You cannot use the review in the Google, My Business, or in some of the other, Instagram reviews and stuff like that. You cannot consider that and, create a aggregated rating for your product. So these are all against the Google guidelines. As soon as works, it will work. But when Google do a manual audit, then probably we will get caught and we will lose it completely, and it's very difficult to come out of a manual penalty. So we should be a little careful and do only what is relevant. Don't go overboard.
That really highlights how small technical issues can create major SEO problems. So the next one is, how important are XML sitemaps for search engine indexings?
Yeah, I am not a big fan of XML sitemap. Now, at least as of now, Google has a very good sophisticated system to crawl your website and understand the content. But again, XML sitemap can come handy for larger websites. If you have an e-commerce website, or you have a news publisher website like an NDTV or Times Now, right? Like where you have been pushing content continuously. Every single day, probably you will be publishing 1,000 pages in the website, like in NDTV and Times Now, right? So those pages definitely need a sitemap. Your e-commerce website definitely needs sitemap because Google cannot, navigate by itself to reach every single page that you have it. So it totally depends. If it is a very small website, if you're working for a very boutique agency, then you have 100, 200 pages, then even if you do not have XML sitemap, it's not going to harm you. But if you have a very high volume pages, 10,000, 20,000, 1 lakh, then you definitely need to have XML sitemap. I'm not saying you don't have to live without XML sitemap. It is good to have, but probably it's not a very high priority for a small scale websites. And even for the large scale websites, the XML sitemap also should run it in a more programmatic way, right? Like you cannot go update URLs in the XML sitemap every single time you publish a content. You have to have a mechanism in place so that new page get published and it returns 200 OK, and it automatically gets into the XML sitemap. So all the CMSs will have it. Right from WordPress to Webflow to Magento to Drupal, every CMS will have it. It is your responsibility to talk to your developer to tell them that this has to be programmatically updated, not a manual update. That doesn't work the time, I would feel. Yeah.
Good insight on how sitemaps still support efficient crawling and indexing.
Yeah.
Next one is, how does crawl budget affect large websites?
It definitely does it. Google doesn't tells you what is the crawl budget assigned to a particular website. No way you can find it out, but there is a good way you can see how crawl budget is being used currently in your website. That is why I told towards the early part of our session, go to your Google Search Console, get into the settings where you can see the crawl budget, how it is being split. If it is going majorly for your 200 OK pages, which is the most important pages of your website, then it is good. If a lot of pages crawl budgets are going for your 404s and 5 not errors and stuff like that, then it is a problem. But again, you have to also see what is part of the 200 OK bucket that I have told you, right? In e-commerce website, you have a lot of filters, right? Like you need to, you can sort it based on prices or sizes or the colors. So for every filter that you apply, you generate a dynamic URL within the platform. You don't observe that. If you watch it on the URL, probably you will know it, but that is how it works externally. And if you let all these URLs are indexed, then it is a waste of crawl, right? Because nobody is going to search for your filter. Filter is for an individual. I have my own preference. You have your own preference of color. I have my own preference of my size. Similarly, you, right? So it is an individual choice. And that exercise can happen within the website once the user reaches it. But the objective for you to rank the category or the subcategory pages, right? Like the t-shirt, a red t-shirt, or yellow t-shirt, or a yellow silk saree. So those kind of searches you wanted to rank, not for the filters that you have set. So it is also important for you to do that. So that is why you crawlers like Screaming Frog, even Ahref or Samrush, you can do a crawl, take the entire log of the crawl analysis and sort out by what is indexable, right? Whatever the pages are returning 200 okay, and what are all the pages that are indexable by Google. Then if you see any unwanted pattern, like filtered queries or URLs with UTM parameters, or URLs with classified parameters, all of those things you can make sure that you can either canonicalize it to the parent category, or you can no index if it is not required. So those decision can definitely save your crawl budget, but it is very important for large scale websites.
That clearly explains why crawl budget management is crucial for large scale websites, ma'am. Can I go for the next question? Okay. How does JavaScript rendering impact SEO?
It impacts the entire SEO, right? If the JavaScript is not rendered, then Google will see zero. Google will go blind with your website, right? You may have a super loading website, you may have a super interesting content, but Google will see as an empty page because Google is not able to render the JavaScript properly. So that is why I have said earlier, sit with your development team, understand what is the kind of a JavaScript rendering that they have used, whether it is a server side rendering or a client side rendering. Server side rendering is very much recommended by Google. In case it is of client side rendering, you need to work with the developer to make sure that it becomes a server side rendering. And again, Google now tells in the recent days that they can also render client side rendering. But again, nobody knows when that rendering happens, because Google has to provide external resources to the bots to render the JavaScript content. So simply put it, if I have to climb 10 floors in a building, and if I have to take an escalator or a lift, then I can smoothly reach the 10th floor. But if I have to take stairs, my body needs extra energy to push me to the 10th floor, right? So that is what the bots has to do it for the JavaScript rendering. It might happen on the first crawl, it might happen on the 10th crawl, it might also happen on the 100th crawl. We never knew it. So that is why let's not, already SEO is a waiting game, right? Like you do and expect start seeing results from month 2 or month 3 or whatever, depends on the competitiveness of the industry. And with this JavaScript rendering and all of that, it is going to be even more difficult to retain the client with you, right? Because the clients are paying us and they expect to see results as soon as possible. And with these things is a pushback, and it put a lot of barricade between the agencies and the clients. So it is very important for us to understand what kind of rendering is being used, and whether Google or any search engines, to for the matter of fact, renders the entire content, because it affects 100%.
Okay. I think we are running out of time, ma'am. May I go with the question and answer poll?
Sure, please.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Actually, thank you, Mercy, for those insightful answers. Now it's time to hear from our audience. So we'll now open the session for live audience QA. If you have any questions you'd like to ask Mercy, please drop them in the QA box, and I'll pick few questions from there. Yes. Yes, already I think we have some questions.
Sure.
Could you please share the framework you use to optimize your content for GEO and AEO?
Okay, that's what we said. GEO and AEO or GEO. The industry is still debating what the name that we have to give. But yeah, coming back to that, your SEO base is going to do 80% of the work, I would say. Right? You have a properly written content. Maybe use AI to create content outlines, but whatever the content, even to win an SEO or AEO or GEO, you have to create a better performing content, right? If something is already ranking in Google or in ChatGPT for whatever the search query or whatever the prompt that we are using. So you wanted to create something better than the best. The best is already ranking in Google. The best is already ranking in LLMs. So you wanted to create something better than the best. Otherwise, we will lose the game. So that is the base. So create the content that is compelling enough. If you are interested in reading the content, then obviously your user also will interested in reading. So if the user is interested in reading the content, Google will start, giving you credit for that, right? So the SEO basics are very, very important. Have the compelling content, structured it properly. You have the heading hierarchy, H1s, H2s. If you have subheadings with that, go, very easily with H3s. And if you, try to have conversational things, right? And now Bing has introduced the fan out queries in their search console. So go there, dig deep and understand. You will not be able to identify the prompt in Bing search console, but you will be identify the, type of questions people will have in mind. That will give you a better clarity. From that, take those inputs from the Bing search console and try to implement it in the content in a little conversational tone. Maybe not all content can have a conversational tone, so in that sense, maybe introduce an FAQ section if it is required, right? And if you're answering a question, don't go like a very lengthy sentences. Give a very short, precise answers. This even worked well in the featured snippet stage as well, like 5-6 years back, when people started talking about zero click searches and featured snippet. That time itself, everybody talked about having precise, short sentences. So say for an example, if you're talking about what is the remedy for migraine, then talk about the remedy first. Then you can go on and on, explain why the remedy, what works, what's the ingredient and all of that. So those are the things are very important. And have smaller paragraphs, because Google and the LLMs are very fond of the small chunks of content, and that is what it shows it. And wherever possible, make the content more authoritative. If you can bring any expert opinion within the content, bring it, and give credit to the experts. Say for an example, if Gopika is writing an expert opinion in the content, link her LinkedIn profile, and in case she has a website, then link it, so that authoritative and the EAT factors and the entity that you are building around the particular author is also going to be the key. So it is just the 80% of your existing SEO, just the 20%, just to make sure the structure and the EAT factors come into place with the schema marks. Yeah, that's what I see.
Thank you for that explanation. Let's take one more question from the audience. It's from Yuvashri. Under Google Search Console, we often see crawled, currently not indexed issue, but it does not give a real signal on why it's happening. What are the actual root causes you see most often? And how do you diagnose which pages are worth fixing versus just letting go?
Got it. See, crawled and not indexed. If any technical issue that you see, be it from Google Search Console or SEMrush or whatever, take it with a pinch of salt, because sometimes the issues might not be an issue only, right? Say for an example, I have a e-commerce website, and the Google is crawling all the query parameters and the filtered URLs. Then probably Google will ignore it, because Google has a sophisticated system to understand that these pages are built for users, not for the search engines, right? In that case, you can ignore those problem, because it's a false alarm that Google has given you. But at sometimes Google also gives you a very good indication that why your content is not being crawled, right? I mean, it's crawled, but sorry, not indexed. So your rendering could be a problem. It's partially rendering, right? So only heading and the next couple of section is getting indexed, and the rest of the content is not getting indexed. So Google feels that the page has a very thin content, like it has a very low, knowledgeable content. So Google might ignore those. And in some cases, the pages might throw a lot of broken links. So Google try to come into the page, and it often's been pushed out with the broken links. So Google is unable to crawl the pages. So those can be the problem, or a very slow loading pages. So mostly I have seen the content, thin content pages, or similarly duplicated content. Somebody will use a template as a content, and just say for an example, you are creating a same day flower delivery business, and for every single location in Madurai you are creating a page. So you create one content page and just replace the area name and publish those pages, right? So in that case, Google will clearly see that this is a templated and boilerplate content, and it doesn't see any value in the content, so it will ignore this. So these are all the common scenarios that I have seen it. But at sometimes Google also gives a false promise, or Google feels that it is not required because it is meant for users. So we can segregate whether it is required to spend my time in fixing this, or it is okay to let it go. So we can make those calls as well here.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am, for that explanation also. As we come towards the end of the today's session, I would like to take a moment to thank Mercy once again for sharing such valuable insights with us. Your experience and practical perspectives on technical SEO and search rankings have truly made this session both informative and engaging. And of course, a big thank you to you all participants for joining us today, for your time, your questions, and your active participations. We truly appreciate your being part of today's Tech Talk sessions. So before we wrap up, we would love for you to stay connected with us and join our upcoming Tech Talk sessions, where we'll continue bringing more industry experts and exciting topics. So make sure you stay connected with .com Infoway to get updates about our future webinars. Once again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Have a wonderful evening ahead. Thank you, Mercy, for this such a wonderful session. Goodbye, and we look forward to seeing you in our next TikTok sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.